This morning we come to a myth, our fourth one in this series, and we want to talk about it and teach about it and engage you in this discussion. And the myth basically goes like this: Jesus was just a man. We're going to look at what Jesus said about himself. What did others have to say about this issue? And then lastly, we'll look at what God said about Jesus in terms of his divinity.
Yeah, what I love about what Jesus said about himself is that he's just very consistent. It's a very consistent message, which would go back to that liar part. You know, usually liars aren't very consistent, right?
Right.
I mean, you're always trying to cover something, and there's not a lot of consistency to. Jesus' message about himself was true from the very beginning. And he says to his parents, in a nutshell, "Didn't you know that I would be in my Father's house?" And so even from 12 years old, as a young man, this Jesus knew who he was. And he knew exactly that he was divine, that he was the very Son of God.
Yeah. What did others
some
say?
others. I jumped to Paul. Paul's just dude in the New Testament. He kind of bumps into Jesus on the road, but before that, he was actually a killer of Christians. Who we call the Apostle Paul. He was against it. He hated it. He wanted to squelch it. He wanted to kill them. And then he bumps into Jesus on the road and says this radical transformation. And now he's the proponent. He's the proclaimer. He's going after people and telling them about this Jesus. And so there's something there in his life. There's an experience. There's a conversion there with Paul. And then when we read in Colossians 1:15-20, Paul writes this. He said, Jesus is the Son of the invisible God. He is the one in whom and through whom and for whom all things hold together. And in verse 19, he kind of pulls it all together. He says this: for God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him.
Just think for a moment about what God himself said. Matthew chapter 3. Verse 17, at the beginning of Jesus and his earthly ministry, some of you in the room know the story. He begins by being baptized. And there he is in the river. There he is being baptized by John. And the scripture says as he comes up out of the water, remember, it says that the heavens parted. I mean, the sky opens up. And in case there was any question, in case there was any worry, in case there would be any speculation, the voice of God declares and pronounces from the heavens, "This is my," what? Say it. Son. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. The last thing we want to say to you is this: we think it's really important that the church, you, me, these guys, we think it's hugely important that we get this one right. This is something that we have to understand. This is something that we've got to own. This is something that we've got to go to great lengths if we need to make sure that we understand this one.